I decided to take Jeanie McIntosh, who still refuses to appear in these films, so here's an artist's impression of her, up the Nicky Nook. What? Where the name Nicky Nook stems from etymologically, I honestly couldn't say. It's probably got something to do with the devil, old Nick and all that. It usually has. Whatever the case, Nicky Nook is a 615-foot high fell, which isn't particularly large until you have to climb it, overlooking the village of Scorton on the western flank of Grizedale Reservoir. The guidebook informed us that the circular walk we were about to undertake, starting from Sleen End. Where did that name come from? It used to just be called the entrance to Grizedale Beck. Over the Nook and back along the road was roughly 3.5 miles in length, and should have taken us 1.5 hours to complete. That'd be for normal people, of course, the sort of people who aren't idiots and who don't get lost all the time. 6 hours. 6 bloody hours. At least I had my cigarette lighter this time. Our car took a right at Scorton Priory, failing to stop at the butty van that's been parked outside ever since COVID. And predictably, we found ourselves almost immediately lost down some cul-de-sac of a farmyard where our tyres were savaged by an extremely angry dog. We haven't got any footage of that. We were too busy trying to escape to film it. GPS is something that happens to other people, according to Jeanie McIntosh. She doesn't like newfangled technology, and that extends to thermos flasks and OS maps. It had been a few years since I'd last rambled up Nicky Nook. Several years, several more pounds, and approximately 10,000 cigarettes since. Sleen End? Seriously, when did they start calling it that? Appeared to be hemorrhaging hikers on our arrival. It's become popular with backpackers in large boots, most of whom appeared to have brought alpine sticks with them, but forgotten their skis. The entrance to Grizedale Beck is surprisingly steep, and particularly treacherous in the winter, the loose earth playing havoc with Jeanie McIntosh's Zimmer. This didn't bode well for our eventual encounter with Nicky Nook itself. Soon, however, we reached the little bridge over Grizedale Brook and headed north through the vertiginously sided valley towards our destination, or fate, depending on how you look at such matters. From there it was a slow climb up the beck, the cobbled path rising incrementally above the brook. The serenity only disturbed by the day trippers with their purple children and their snot-nosed dogs. It wasn't like that once, back in my youth. In those days you'd encounter approximately one person every 4 weeks. Some time and several bottles of angina tablets later, we reached the pump house, or whatever it is. It's always been there regardless. It's probably got something to do with the reservoir, or the devil. At about this juncture we took another wrong turn and ended up at some pheasant-infested substation or other. It was only when a couple of dedicated hikers, who also had an aversion to maps, caught up with us, and explained that they'd just come over the top, that we realised we'd gone the wrong way. They were last seen heading down a hollow in the fellside, looking panicked. They might still be down there for all I know. Beyond the sheep-proof gate lay Grizedale Reservoir itself, constructed in 1866, along with the proper path snaking up Nicky Nook. The last time I climbed this fell was probably about 80 years ago. In those days, the track was a foot-wide crumbling affair created by meandering sheep. Nowadays it's gravelled and stepped with massive wooden beams that you'd need legs at least 6 foot long from heel to thigh to navigate successfully. The climb is almost vertical. Before we attempted it, various anxious hikers politely remarked to Jeanie McIntosh that it's very steep, you know, whilst looking at her Zimmer surreptitiously. Nonetheless, we decided to risk it in the hopes that somebody amongst the distant groups had the emergency phone number for the air ambulance. 300 feet later, and Jeanie McIntosh had turned from a violent shade of red to a nauseous shade of purple. The going was rough. Oxygen masks were required. The bleached bones of long-dead sheep being a constant reminder that despite our advancing years, we'd never actually acquired any wisdom. Several hours later, wheezing like a set of burst bagpipes, we reached the trig point, and realised that much like my own, the backside of the fell had grown considerably since the last time I visited. I honestly couldn't recall it winding serpentine into the distance like that, with hikers resembling ants traversing the far horizon below. And at this point we took another wrong turn. There are yellow arrows along the trail, but they all seem to be at obvious places such as stiles or gateposts. Never at junctions where the paths split when you need them. Before long, we found ourselves confronted by some randomly placed construction. A heap of stones speared by a tattered flag, like some demented prehistoric Dalek calling out to its mothership. 6 bloody hours. Eventually, we discovered a bench. There ought to be more, dedicated to those hikers who'd perished on Nicky Nook's summit. But it was built at such an oblique angle that it was about as much use as a broken misery cord. Dawn was breaking by the time we reached the road to Sleen End again. Jeanie McIntosh was having to breathe through an oxygen mask, and I was eating dandelions from the verge to keep my energy levels up. We half expected the car to have rolled off into a ditch just to finish the day off properly. So that was Nicky Nook. We won't be doing it again. Anyhow, click like if you want, subscribe, and we'll meet up again next week if we've recovered to explore somewhere flatter and more sensible.